Some minds don't just experience emotions. They register them in high definition. A small shift in someone's tone, a pause that lingers just a second too long, a smile that looks right, but feels slightly off. Most people move past these details without noticing. You don't. You feel them. You analyze them. And sometimes you carry them with you long after the moment has passed. You've probably been told you're too sensitive. Maybe that you overthink. Maybe that you take things too personally. But what if emotional sensitivity isn't weakness? What if it's a specific psychological wiring, one that processes the world more deeply than most? Today, we're exploring the psychology of the emotionally sensitive mind, how it develops, why it feels overwhelming at times, and why it may be one of your greatest strengths. And by the end, you may stop trying to fix something that was never broken. Emotional sensitivity doesn't mean instability. It doesn't mean you lack resilience, and it certainly doesn't mean you're dramatic. Psychologically, emotional sensitivity is heightened responsiveness in the nervous system. Your brain processes emotional information more intensely. When someone criticizes you, you don't just hear the words. You register the tone, the facial expression, the subtle shift in energy behind what was said. This trait is often associated with high emotional reactivity and characteristics of a highly sensitive person. Your nervous system is tuned to pick up signals others overlook. That isn't fragility, it's perception. The real difficulty isn't feeling too much. It's never being taught how to regulate what you feel. Some people are born with a more reactive nervous system. Brain research suggests that certain individuals show stronger activation in areas responsible for empathy, emotional processing, and threat detection. But biology is only part of the story. Environment shapes sensitivity, too. If you grew up in a household where moods changed unpredictably, if tension could appear without warning, if you had to read subtle cues to stay safe, your brain adapted. You became observant, emotionally alert, highly attuned. For many, emotional sensitivity begins as a survival skill. You learn to scan the room, to anticipate conflict, to detect emotional shifts before they became obvious. And that adaptation doesn't disappear in adulthood. It becomes part of how you experience relationships, work, and social situations. Emotionally sensitive people tend to have strong empathy. You sense when someone is struggling, even if they insist they're fine. You notice inconsistencies between words and feelings. You feel other people's stress almost as if it were your own. But empathy without boundaries can become emotional overload. When you constantly absorb external emotions, your nervous system doesn't get a break. This can lead to emotional exhaustion, rumination, and overthinking. You replay conversations. You question your responses. You search for hidden meaning. Your brain is trying to resolve emotional data. But without closure, that analysis turns into anxiety. Sensitivity gathers information. Overthinking traps you in it. Learning the difference is transformative. In relationships, emotional sensitivity creates depth. You remember small details. You anticipate needs. You value emotional honesty. But you may also prioritize harmony over authenticity. You may silence your discomfort to avoid conflict. And because you notice subtle changes others miss, you may feel hurt more quickly. Not because you're fragile, but because you perceive more. This is where boundaries become essential. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They protect your empathy from turning into self-neglect. Here's what many people overlook. Emotionally sensitive individuals often develop high emotional intelligence. You understand nuance. You detect emotional undercurrents. You read between the lines. In leadership, creativity, and deep relationships, this is powerful. The world often rewards bold confidence, but it relies on emotional awareness. and awareness is something you naturally possess. The goal isn't to become less sensitive, it's to become regulated. Many sensitive people cope by shutting down. They detach, they numb, they withdraw. But suppression doesn't eliminate sensitivity. It stores it. And stored emotions eventually surface as stress, irritability, or burnout. Regulation is different. Regulation means recognizing what you feel, naming it, allowing it, and choosing your response intentionally. Instead of reacting instantly, you pause. That pause is power. You don't need to feel less. You need stability beneath what you feel. Emotionally sensitive minds often feel out of place. Small talk can feel draining. Crowded spaces overstimulating. Superficial conversations exhausting. That's because your mind craves depth. You're wired for authenticity and emotional clarity, and when you don't find it, you withdraw. Not out of arrogance, but preservation. You are selective with your energy. Not antisocial. Not weak. Selective. For years, you may have tried to reduce your sensitivity, to toughen up, to care less, to stop reacting so strongly. But what if the goal isn't reducing sensitivity? What if the goal is strengthening your internal stability? When your nervous system feels safe, sensitivity becomes clarity. You read people accurately without absorbing their emotions. You empathize without losing yourself. You feel deeply without drowning in it. That is emotional maturity. Not less emotion, more grounding. And here's the question rarely considered. What if your sensitivity isn't a flaw, but a form of perception? What if you notice more because you truly perceive more? Micro-expressions, tone shifts, energy changes in a room. Most people filter those out. You don't. The real issue may not be your sensitivity. It may be a culture that undervalues it. Because sensitivity requires slowness, attention, depth. And we live in a world that rewards speed and detachment. But when relationships fracture, when truth hides beneath words, when someone needs to be understood rather than fixed, who do people turn to? The ones who notice, the ones who feel, the ones who understand what isn't being said. Maybe you were never too sensitive. Maybe you were always aware. And once you stop fighting your wiring, you stop shrinking yourself. You stop apologizing for depth. And you begin to use your sensitivity as a compass instead of treating it like a flaw. And that shift changes everything.